In this training module, we're going to help you to drive improvements in 3 areas: building rapport with prospects, making prospects more interested in your products, and establishing more credibility for yourself and for your company. We're going to go through each one at a time, so let's just jump right in, starting with rapport. And let's start out with talking about what exactly rapport is. So here's just a textbook definition. Rapport is a term used to describe, in common terms, the relationship of 2 or more people who are in sync or on the same wavelength because they feel similar or relate well to each other. So if you think of that, if you can think of a time when you really had good rapport with someone, it might have been someone that you communicated well with, and maybe you communicated well with them because they understood you. They were in the same place of life. Maybe you were going through a school or a class or a work experience with them, and what you talked about they understood, and what they talked about you understood, and this made you feel like you were on the same page, on the same wavelength, and that made you feel comfortable with one another, and that helped to build a bond with you, and that sometimes established very good relationships and maybe friendships in your past, if you can think of that. Now, you can do that, or sometimes that happens with prospects and with customers, and that's a really good thing. Why is that a good thing? Well, especially when you're prospecting, you need a responsive prospect. And what do we mean by responsive prospect? We mean, well, gosh darn it, it really helps when the prospect answers your call, right? And responds to your emails, or if you ask them for a meeting, they open up their calendar and make themselves available for you. So responsive is important, and the more they like you, the more responsive they'll be to you. We also need a prospect that'll share information. You know, if we say, well, who are some of the people in that department, or what does your existing pricing look like, or whatnot. A prospect that shares information like that with us really helps position us for success, because the more information we gather, the more leads we can uncover, the better business case we can put together, the better the presentation we can give. So we need a prospect to share information. The more rapport we have, the more they like us, the more information they'll share. And at the end of the day, you've heard this saying before, but people buy from people they like. So it just really helps to have a prospect who likes you. So as you can see, rapport is pretty important, right? And the thing is that I believe that a lot of people think rapport is what it is. Either someone's going to like you or they aren't. You just be yourself, and the people that appreciate you for who you are will like you, and the others won't. And I do believe in being yourself and being authentic, but the reality is that there are some subtle changes that you can make, or subtle things that you can do to build stronger bonds with prospects, with anybody really, but we're really focusing on prospecting here. So here are some subtle things that you can change, and these are all very subtle, right? So not one of these is going to be a home run that says you do this one thing and then everybody loves you, right? It's all, it's some of these you might already do, some of them you might not do, and you can add. Some of them you may disagree with, but if you do some of these consistently, it can help to build relationships. And so let's go through these tactics in terms of how to take control over the level of rapport that you have with other people, which means how to take control over making people like you better and making stronger relationships with prospects. And so the first one we talk about is displaying humility. And so another definition here, but to just define humility, humility is the quality of being modest and respectful. Humility in various interpretations is widely seen as a virtue in many religious and philosophical traditions, being connected with the notions of transcendent unity with the universe or the divine, and an egolessness. Okay, so kind of a long definition there, and there's a lot in there, but actually underline some words that I think are important, which is modest, respectful, and egolessness. Now, um, when you display those characteristics to other people, people feel comfortable around you. People um, can find you relatable. And so another reason why I underlined those three words is that if you think of the traditional salesperson, those are three words that don't really go with them. Starting with egolessness. Most salespeople are type A personalities. They think they're the best. They're taught to be the best, and they fight every day to be the best. And with that comes a bit of an ego, right? Which isn't necessarily great for building relationships because people don't like people with egos, especially if you're selling to an executive who also has an ego, right? If you naturally fall in this position of I'm the salesperson of the year, and you're dealing with the executive top dog at a company, then there might be a clash there of egos. The other thing about respectful, going to one of the other words here that's underlined, respectful. Sometimes salespeople can push to push deals, to try to create deals, to push opportunities along, to try to close opportunities, and sometimes that's not completely respectful. A salesperson can often think about me and closing in terms of my deal, my commission, my quota, my product, and cannot really can sometimes forget about being respectful. And modest, modest kind of goes hand in hand with the egolessness, but being modest. I mean, salespeople are often, again, always trying to be the best, but sometimes admitting that you're not the best can build bonds with other people. So those are some words I want to focus on, and the reality is that displaying humility is actually very, very difficult, and I kind of touched on some of these, but it's difficult for salespeople typically because we're always taught to be the best. There's sales competitions, there's quotas, there's rankings. A lot of salespeople are typically an alpha type of personality. There's maybe people are taught to be aggressive, type A personalities. So it can be tough to really, try to be more, to have more humility when you're talking with prospects. But there are some small things that you can do to seem more like you have more humility. And here are some examples. So sometimes mistakes happen, right? And if you've ever been around someone who won't admit that they did something wrong, it's really, and then compare that to someone who, think about, a very prestigious figure, and think about when somebody like Steve Jobs or Bill Gates or the President of the United States can get up in front of everybody and say, that was the wrong call. I did not make the best decision there that could have been made in that particular moment. If you can picture that, that's a pretty. It's showing vulnerability. It's displaying that you're not perfect, and when people see that, it helps to build connections. It makes you relatable, and so it's a really powerful thing to do. Now, it's not saying admit mistakes that don't happen or create mistakes. But if something doesn't go smoothly, take ownership of it. It's a really powerful way to sub-communicate to someone else. Admitting that you don't have the answers. A prospect might ask you questions, and there's nothing wrong with saying, I'm sorry. To be honest with you, I don't actually know the answer to that question. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to find that answer and I'm going to get it to you by this date. Admitting that you're not being perfect, admitting that you're not the expert in a particular area, being able to laugh at yourself is a very powerful thing to do, and just be real. So those are some ways to display humility, that you're a real person, and that can help you to build connections and rapport with prospects. Just again, that's a very subtle thing, but those are small changes that you can make, and they can have an impact. The next one, moving on, is to complement the competition. This one's a bit And in fact, a lot of these are actually going to be counterintuitive. They go against everything that you would think is the right thing to do or everything you've been taught to do. But here's an example of how to complement the competition. You say, well, who else are you looking at? Oh, we're also looking at Prototech. Okay, yes, we know Prototech well. They actually have a really good platform. But one of the main ways that we differ from them is that we've developed all of our own software in-house or something like that. So what you see here is in this example, we gave the competition a compliment. And of course, you want to follow that up with saying maybe you might say something that you're better at, or a weakness of theirs, or something that you want to then get back to you, right? But when you do this, this does a lot for the level of rapport, because one is it displays confidence. If I'm not so threatened by the competition that I can say something nice about them, then I'm pretty confident about myself, my sales abilities, the relationship I have with this person, the product that I sell, and whatnot. And when you display confidence, people find that they appreciate that, and they're attracted to that, and that can help to build rapport. This also positions you as an advisor, because if the prospect is trying to decide who to go with, and you give them some information about the other company, you present yourself more as an advisor and less as a salesperson. It builds credibility, because if I'm going to tell you what they're good at, which I probably wouldn't lie about. I mean, why would I lie and say they're good at something if they're not good at that? Then I'm probably going to seem a little bit more credible when I tell you what I'm good at, right? So it helps to build credibility. It helps to build trust, because I'm just being real with you. Think in terms of the trust. Think about what happens to the trust when he says we're looking at Prototech, and I say, oh, you don't want to have anything to do with them. They're questionable in how they do business, and they're not very nice, and I've heard just people, making the worst decision by going over there, right? When I say something like that, that might be the truth in reality, but it's dogging your competition. It's a low class way to go, and what that does is it damages the trust, because then the prospect sees me as like wanting to manipulate the situation, and just like I'm trying to talk him into buying from me, and I'll make up something about the competition to keep things under control, right? So if we attack the competition, it's just like those negative political ads. It can negatively hurt the trust that they have with you. And so if we do the opposite of that, it helps to build trust. If we say that they're good at something, then we seem more likable, more trustable. Moving on. Disqualify the prospect. So we've talked about disqualifying in other training modules. There's a module talking about disqualifying by itself, but here's an example, and it's basically kind of like expressing doubt or doing a takeaway. But so if the prospect says, I don't know, our current system is working pretty well, and then you could reply with something like, if things are going well, maybe it doesn't make sense to make a change. So we're expressing doubt on whether they should buy from us, and we're doing a sort of a takeaway. Again, we explain this tactic inside and out in another training module, so you should watch that. But this tactic there's a time when you should use this tactic, and when you do use it, it typically will create a spike in the level of rapport. And the reason why is because it puts the prospect's interest first. Your interest is to sell the prospect or to sell product, and their interest is to use money wisely and make good decisions and make good purchases. So if you express doubt in them buying from you, making sense, then you're focusing on their interest, not yours. That builds rapport immediately. Again, it displays confidence, which we already kind of talked about. Displays honesty, and if I'm looking out for you and I'm telling you that maybe it doesn't make sense, then I'm presenting myself as an honest person. Just as though if I say you need this, and I'm not thinking about your interests, then I might not seem as honest. It displays a lack of aggressiveness. The aggressive plays to push, push, push. This is to sort of, to step back and begin to kind of walk away, figuratively speaking, and that helps to build rapport. This can help you to stand out from all the other salespeople, because you know what? Even as sophisticated as the profession of selling keeps getting, the majority of salespeople don't do this tactic, and so you can stand out from the other salespeople. When you stand out, that makes people respect you and can help to build rapport. Understand the prospect. So a quote here from Dr. Stephen Covey from his book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People: seek first to understand in order to be understood. This concept refers to we always want people to understand us, right? If I'm a teenage son and I want to take a car out for the weekend on a Friday night, I want my parents to understand why they should let me do that and why that is important. I want them to understand that. When you're a salesperson, you want someone to understand why they should buy your product. When you're trying to get your place of restaurant picked for the night, in the family, you want people to understand why that's the right place to go to. So we always want people to understand us, and what this tactic is talking about is before you try to get people to understand you, seek out and put in energy to understand them. And it's basically understanding them which will lead to you being understood, is kind of the logic there. And this is really powerful. It's really important, and the thing about it is we all sort of have this natural need to want to be understood. And when you show to someone that you understand what they're talking about, it feeds that internal need that we have to need to be understood. A quick example: if you could picture trying to talk to someone who doesn't speak the language that you speak, and you're talking to them, and you're using hand gestures, and you're trying to change your accent and talking louder and slower, and they're still not understanding you, right? It's interesting how we'll try those different things like it's going to help when we don't speak the same language. But if you think about how you feel in that moment, you feel very frustrated because they don't understand you. They don't understand what you're trying to say. Or if you ever go see a movie and it was really funny, you try to recreate the scene and tell somebody about it, but they don't laugh like you laughed when you were watching the movie. And it's because you didn't really communicate it well. You didn't recreate it, but it doesn't feel good that when they don't understand you, Where if you compare that to a situation where you're talking to someone and everything you explain, they get it, because either you're communicating clearly or they saw the movie, they thought it was hilarious also, and that feels really good because what we're trying to communicate, they understand us, and it feels really comfortable. Well, we can make the prospect feel like we understand them, and this can help them to feel comfortable like we do when we're explaining that movie that someone else saw and someone else thought was hilarious. And so we can make them feel comfortable in this way, and that can help to build rapport. And the next few tactics that we go through are going to be slightly different they're going to be actually focusing on something else other than understanding the prospect. But when you do them, you'll be sub-communicating to the prospect that you understand them, and we'll go through them one at a time. But here's an example. So we'll talk about this tactic, and you'll see this actually helps you to let the prospect know that you understand them. But this tactic is about respecting their time. So when we recommend when you start a cold call, always asking if the prospect is in the middle of something, or if they're available. Do you have a moment? Or if you're showing up for a scheduled meeting, are you still available for this? So that's confirming availability. Some people actually debate whether or not you should do that on a cold call. I have a number of reasons why I support confirming if they're available. You don't want to sell to them if they're not available at that particular moment. Anyways, but what that does is that when you confirm that they're available, if you answer the phone and the first thing I do is I say, hey, do you have a moment, or have I caught you in the middle of anything? Right in that exact moment, I'm showing you that I respect your time, and I'm not going to take it away unless you have it to spare. And so when I respect your time, this does subcommunicate that I understand you, because I understand how busy you are, and I understand how important your time is, and I want to make sure that that I protect that and don't abuse that. So that can help to build rapport. You can also do this in meetings, like when you start a meeting, asking if there's a hard stop for the discussion, and then confirming how much time do you have to spend with us today, and then even throughout the meeting, checking your watch and just making sure, how are we doing on time? Are we covering everything? Do we have enough time to complete this? All of that just shows respect, and that can help to build rapport. It might sound like a really minor thing, right? I mean, but when you begin a call or begin a meeting and carry yourself in that way, then you look like a pro. You look very respectful, and it's that subtle change that makes people like you, right? I mean, you do that one tactic by itself, and you won't see a whole lot of difference. But if you do that, and when you hear about the competition, you compliment them, and you show the prospect that you understand what they're going through. It's these subtle things that make you a very likable salesperson and can help you to build rapport. Another thing is, we're moving on to the next tactic here, but focusing on the prospect's interests. So we always like to talk about stuff that we're interested in, right? If I saw a movie and you saw a movie, if we talk about the movie I saw and I just talk about it for 20 minutes, or we talk about the movie that you saw and we talk about that for 20 minutes, which conversation are you going to be more engaged in? And I personally believe in most cases you'll have the person's attention when you're talking about the movie that they saw, and it's because they either have more interest in that movie because they chose that movie over the movie you saw, but even if they're interested in both, they just have more knowledge and more experience on the subject in the movie that they saw. So if we can have the conversation focused on their movie, we can have their attention, and if we have their attention, we can build stronger rapport with them. It's really interesting. You could go out on a date, and if you just keep talking about whatever the other person wants to talk about and their interests and their hobbies, they'll think you're the most interesting person when you might not have even talked about stuff that you're really interested in at all. They'll feel so comfortable talking about all the topics that they like, because that's where we're most comfortable, and so you can do that with prospects. Now, some areas where you can assume that your prospects have interest are their career. They might really enjoy talking about what they've done in the past, or where they're going, or what they can do to improve their career. Money is something that we're all motivated by. Success, family, fun, personal interests. So it kind of gets to finding out what they're interested in. Now, what I would say is, so when you find out what they're interested in, then you can kind of point out some commonalities, point out some parallels, and that can help to build rapport. So one way that you could do this is looking at someone on social media before a meeting and seeing if maybe you worked at similar companies, you know some similar people, and that can create commonalities and rapport and areas of interest to talk about. Interest on the prospect side. Now, one caveat to this is that what the traditional salesperson will do is they'll start out a meeting or a call with a prospect's personal interests. Did you go anywhere for spring break? How was the trip to Mexico? They might see a picture on the desk. How old's your daughter? And I would say to be careful of this, because if it's the first meeting, if it's the first cold call, if you don't know this person yet, their time's very valuable, and they might want to talk about those details with someone that they have a relationship with, but they might not have a relationship with you yet. They might not have rapport with you yet. And if you go to those personal subjects too early, they're going to feel like you're wasting their time, because they don't know you, right? So you haven't earned you kind of haven't earned their rapport yet. So don't waste their time. And if when you waste their time, you begin to decrease rapport because their time is very valuable. And when you show respect for their time, you increase rapport. So where the takeaway there is you want to focus on the prospect's interest, but and you can do that by focusing on the business they work for, the company they work for, their career, and whatnot. And then once you've established rapport, then you can work your way down to focus on their family, their kids, their vacation, their personal hobbies, and whatnot. Next tactic: listen to the prospect. So prospects. This kind of does reinforce the understand the prospect. So when you really actively listen, and prospects think that you respect what they say, it displays that you understand them. It increases their respect for you by doing those things. It lets them do more of the talking. This kind of goes towards you talking about the prospect, your friend's movie, instead of talking about the movie that you saw. And so this is a really powerful tactic, and some ways to consciously do this. Maintain very steady eye contact. There's nonverbal confirmations like nodding your head when someone's talking. You can't do that on a phone call. There's verbal confirmations like okay, oh, I see, oh, interesting. That lets someone know that you're listening to them. You can reflect back. A prospect might tell you something, and you say, oh, okay, so if I understand correctly, you all are having challenges with this, but this other area is working pretty good, and whatnot. So the other thing you do when a prospect's talking, take notes. Even if you're hearing everything and you got it all together in your head, sometimes just jotting down some notes tells the prospect what they're saying is very important, and you're listening very closely. It's a very powerful thing to do. Moving forward on the prospect's terms, this means when you, instead of forcing the prospect to move forward on your terms, which would be as quickly as possible, closing the deal, purchasing today, you kind of try to figure out what does the prospect want to do next. And examples of moving on the prospect's terms are asking some questions like this, saying, oh, okay, at the end of a meeting and at the end of a call, what direction do you want to go from here? What do you want to do next? When would you like me to check back in with you? When would you like to meet again? So if you think about it, those questions are very different from your aggressive always be closing, right? The always be closing questions might be like, what can we do to get you in there today? What can, you must purchase today? What can I do to get your business? So this is a bit softer, right? It's a softer approach. Maybe it doesn't work for you. What I would say is that in order to ask these questions, you need to do a lot of the standard blocking and tackling that's in these other training modules in this training program, like qualifying. If you don't qualify the prospect, let's just go through the list. If you don't qualify the prospect, if you don't find that they have pain that you can fix, if you haven't built a certain level of interest, if you haven't built any rapport, if you haven't been trial closing, and if you don't have activity in your pipeline, you don't want to probably ask these questions, because if you haven't done any of that, the answers to these questions might be call me in a year, don't ever call me again. But if you have qualified and the prospect does have issues that you can fix, and you have a certain relationship there going on, and you have other deals in your pipeline, with confidence, you can say, well, when do you want to meet again? What's the next step that you want to do? And when you're able to be that confident and that more of a soft sell approach, consultative approach versus a pushy approach, that helps to build rapport. But you do need to do those other things in order to do that. So those are some subtle things that you can do to increase rapport. There are some subtle things that we can do also to build interest. And because the reality is I think a lot of times people think, oh, my product does X, Y, and Z, and you either need to do what X, Y, and Z does, and then you'll be interested, or you don't. And all I can do is talk about X, Y, and Z to make you interested. Meaning, all I can do is talk about my product, right? And if you're not getting really interested, I'm just going to keep talking about my product more. I'm going to go into more detail. I'm going to talk to you about more features. And the reality is that there are other things that we can talk about to generate interest and generate legitimate interest. So we're going to go through those real quickly here. And the first one is communicating value. So there's a whole module we talked about here in this training on value, but this can help to build interest. And value is not what X, Y, and Z features do. It's how those features help me, right? So you shift from talking about products and features to talking about benefits, the technical benefits, the business benefits. What does it mean to me when I use your product? And you could go one step further to connect that value that you offer with some pain that the prospect has mentioned that they're experiencing. One that we often forget that is extremely powerful is communicating the ROI that you deliver, the return on investment that your product delivers. So it's real easy for us to again talk about the features do this, the features do that, and it costs this. But if I purchase that, what's the return? What are the savings over 18 months? So a real powerful statement might be, most of our clients get a return of investment of 200% within the first 3 years, and the money that they actually that's spent on the purchase pays for itself in 18 months. So those are really powerful figures to talk about. If I can make a switch and then in 18 months I'm even, and that I have new systems in place, and then from there I'm in the positive and saving more money. Those are really powerful things, and those are different than saying our product does this and our product does that. Storytelling, talking about an existing client that you helped with or a past client, and talking about the problem that they have, how you fix that, where they are today. That's extremely powerful stuff. And what's even more powerful is if you can think of a client that's in a similar situation to what the one they are in. It can really help the prospect to visualize why they should move forward. And speaking of visualizing, painting a picture of a future state. This is kind of like, if someone's looking at your product, trying to use descriptive terms and descriptions to get them to kind of visualize and picture where they would be down the road if they purchase from you. So like an example, I think like weight loss and physical fitness, and companies do this a lot. They'll show you a picture of what someone looks like, and they try to get you to think about, wow, if I do this program. A way to do it with this sales prospecting program is if you implement some of these tactics, and you can improve your prospecting by, let's say, 15% in terms of generating qualified leads, and that can lead to you being able to consistently hit your quota. And if you consistently hit your quota, you're not only going to make more money, but you can advance at the company that you work for. And that could lead to moving into management, leadership positions, more senior roles. Might lead to opportunities outside of your company. Might lead to financial independence someday. So just kind of going through that discussion there, I'm trying to paint a picture of where you will be if you buy into what I'm selling you. And right now I'm selling you training information. Your differentiation. How do you differ from the competition? There's likely lots of other companies that sell what you sell. So if you're talking to a prospect and you want to get them interested, talk about how you differ. Focus on that. Maybe you don't have a lot of differentiation. Maybe it's your price that you differ on. Maybe it's your service. Maybe it's your technology. Threats from doing nothing. The biggest competition you face is the status quo. It's not the direct competitor. It's that the prospect might just not end up doing anything. So it's important to talk to them about what that looks like. Now, a real easy to grasp example here would be an insurance person selling flood insurance. So we can maybe do without flood insurance, but that insurance, and if we don't really kind of really think about what could happen if we don't have flood insurance, then we might not purchase. But if the agent says, you could probably get by without it, but there have been some weather reports about this hurricane season, and we're kind of due for a big storm. Based on your property, if flooding occurred, your current policy means that you'd probably have damages between 50 to 100 grand. Now, are you in a position where you could deal with that if that happens, or would that be a really bad scenario? And so in that situation, we talked about the threat of them not doing anything, and most businesses have something like this. Sometimes there are some products that the prospect might be okay without, but once you've figured out those nuggets, right? Whether it's a story, whether it's a statement of how you differ, maybe it's a value statement. It's what you can do to kind of execute and build interest consistently is to have a list of those statements, and those become your silver bullet statements. And so you could use those at any different type of conversation. You could use them on a cold call. You go through them. Go through like 3 or 4 of them. You're trying to build a little interest. You go, hey, well, but before we wrap up, I want to let you know the way we differ is this. You might want to think about this if you're thinking about not doing anything. The return on our product is this. So you could go through them like a list, and you work through that as a list of silver bullet statements. And so here are some on the screen, but we help many companies in the manufacturing industry to decrease cost of goods sold. Investments in our products typically pay them back in 18 months and whatnot. So the last stage of this training is building credibility, and credibility is kind of that it's that you're a credible resource, not only you as a salesperson, but your product and your company. And so there's a few tactics that we'll go through, and here they are. We'll go through them one at a time. But the first one is establishing social proof. So this is really good with when you're actually doing prospecting, because when you deal, and we talk about this a little bit with gatekeepers, but when you're trying to establish relationships, you might have people that have their guard up, and especially gatekeepers, and they just want to know, are you an outsider or are you an insider? An outsider would be a pesky salesperson trying to work their way in. Insider might be an existing vendor or someone who we're already doing business with. And so a great way to establish social proof, which basically establishes your credibility, is to name drop people that you're talking to, or you've spoken to, you're planning on meeting with. You could also name drop titles of people that you typically work with. If you're calling at an executive level, name dropping that you work a lot with CFOs can help to establish your credibility. Storytelling, we talked about storytelling to build interest. You can also use storytelling to establish your credibility. And it works, and the execution is kind of similar. You might use it at different points if you're trying to establish credibility, but basically that tactic accomplishes 2 things. Displaying a lack of availability. So there's something real. This can either apply to your product or it could apply to your personal availability. But there's something very powerful, like when you're trying to schedule a meeting, and instead of saying, I'm wide open all week, whenever you can meet, I'll be there, right? Versus saying, well, things are really, really busy. I could probably squeeze you in Tuesday morning, or I could do something Thursday afternoon. Do either of those work for you? You don't have to do this, but that latter statement makes you seem a lot less available, which can sub-communicate to the prospect that you have a good product, you're a good salesperson, you got a lot going on, which means they might respect you more and find you more credible. You can also express some lack of availability about your product, and sometimes it's the truth that the product isn't completely available, but you could sometimes share with the prospect that if they're looking to place an order, you probably want to get that in at such and such time so that we can make sure that the product gets allocated to you. Not saying to lie or anything, but communicating to them that the product isn't just completely available. Doing that the right way can communicate that it's a good product, a lot of people are buying it, and you're a credible company. Displaying a lack of neediness. This kind of goes to your credibility as a salesperson, but a prospect knows that you want to sell your product to them, and they know that you will get excited about that. But there's a big difference between wanting to sell to them and needing to sell to them. So when you want the deal but you don't need the deal, that communicates, well, not only does it communicate that you're a good salesperson, but it might communicate that your product's good because, think about a company that has a line around the corner, out the door and around the corner versus a company that's, showroom is a ghost town, right? I'm going to feel more comfortable buying from the company that has the line around the corner because they must have a better product, and it's important to me to buy the best product. So a lack of neediness in selling the deal, can show, again, you're a good salesperson, you got a good product. And the way to do this, you can always be persistent and excited about talking to the prospect and closing the deal, but basically one way to kind of trick yourself to where you don't present yourself as needy is to always act like you've already hit and exceeded your quota when you're dealing with prospects. Of course, mentally, and when you're dealing with your manager, you might want to always act like you're fighting to hit your quota, even if you do exceed it. But you would want to flip that when you're in front of prospects to always just be. It's like almost kind of walking with a swagger. Like, I want your business, would love to have you as a client. If it doesn't happen, it's okay. You don't necessarily need to say those exact words, but that's the way you carry yourself. And that can help to build credibility. Displaying consensus, which means it's sort of like the herd mentality. Society we feel comfortable doing what other people are doing, and if you want your prospect to feel comfortable purchasing from you, you can make them feel like everybody's purchasing from you. So, little subtle things that you communicate. Oh, we're slammed. People love this. Everybody's switching over to this. Using language like that to create a sense that there's a herd mentality going on, and a consensus can help to establish your credibility. Testimonials, getting testimonials from customers, sharing them with prospects. Sales scripture. Here's an example. Sales scripture helped me to get my business to the next level and increase my profitability by 20%. In the next 12 months after working with them. That's a great testimonial. That helps to build credibility. And the last one that we actually look at is company facts, which it's kind of interesting because this is the last one that we look at. And we put this one at the bottom of the list of your tactics, and this is the one that average salespeople actually lead with. And company facts are: we've been in business for 30 years, we have 600 clients using our whatever, we have offices in 60 countries, we won such and such awards in these categories, and those are good. Those are good data points to share with someone to build credibility, but we say share those at the end. Let me talk about all these other things about to build credibility, and then right before I kind of let you go, I'm going to throw those out at you as well. And so that's credibility as well as rapport and interest. And the key takeaway here is to not sit back and just completely be yourself in terms of just talk about your product and call the person and try to sell and push things forward as fast as you can. If you use some finesse in terms of how you build rapport, be a good listener, understand the prospect, be respectful, have humility, and then when it comes time to building interest, you focus on the value, focus on the ROI, the differentiation, the impact of doing nothing, those key areas, and then do some things to build credibility, such as not being completely available, sharing a testimonial, client story, and whatnot. Those are all subtle things that can transform how you communicate interpersonally and the relationships that you build. So hope that helps. Check out our other training modules as well, and wish you all the best.